As I've told you, I've been pro platforms. I might have to wage war on No Jumper.
That's DJ Academics, and he's just the start. Rappers across hip-hop are reacting to Adam22's sentence, and the reactions are not light. For Extra called for a fade. Boozy weighed in, and Pop Smoke's family broke their silence. Adam22 didn't think things would get this far when he made a deadly mistake. The interview that lit the match. Adam22, born Adam Gomez 1, is the founder of No Jumper, a podcast and media platform that built its name in the SoundCloud rap era and has been called a major force in underground rap culture. In 2025, Adam22 booked a guest who changed the conversation around his platform. The guest was the young man identified as the alleged Pop Smoke shooter, often referred to online as the Blockstar Kid. He had served a sentence for the 2020 home invasion that ended in Pop Smoke's death, and he sat down with Adam22 shortly after his release. The interview was framed by Adam22 as a documentation of hip-hop history. The guest, a juvenile at the time of the killing, had been processed under California's juvenile sentencing rules, which cap sentences for minors at juvenile life with a release age in the early 20s. In the sit-down, Adam22 asked about the night Pop Smoke died, the role the guest played, and what his life looked like behind bars. The guest spoke about being released as a young man after serving roughly 4 to 5 years and about the events of February 2020 when Adam22 later sat down to defend the booking. He laid out the path on camera. He described how the connection came through people who were close to the guest and how multiple outlets had reportedly been considered before he was offered the conversation.
How did the interview with Pop Smoke's alleged killer come about?
So we know a bunch of people who are real close to him.
According to Adam22, he believed he was the right person to hold the conversation and that the story was one he saw as part of the hip-hop record. He leaned into the framing that No Jumper has historically platformed street-level voices rather than only the top-tier names. And he said the audience demand was already there.
It's like we gravitate more towards the street level. I felt like it was almost like my duty to do that for our audience.
That framing, duty, documentation, audience demand became the spine of his defense once the clips dropped. And the clips dropped quickly. Within hours, sections of the interview were circulating across X, Instagram, and YouTube. Reaction accounts trimmed the longer episode into the moments that landed hardest, and the tone of those moments did most of the damage. According to reporting that ran in the Express Tribune, the guest used phrases that read as casual when paired with the subject of the conversation, and one line that circulated heavily framed his own sentence as something he got off too lightly on. Combination of his age, his release, and his tone became the engine of the story. The framing in the room was layered. Adam22 walked the guest through the question of remorse. And at one point, he had to coax a reaction by laying out a hypothetical about an accidental car collision. He told the room that the guest had nodded along when he described feeling horrible, but only after he'd put the words into the conversation himself. That description, a young man unable to put remorse into words without prompting, became one of the central anchors of the backlash. For viewers who knew Pop Smoke's catalog and knew the context of his death, the framing read as a window into something they didn't want to see, not a reckoning. The piece of the interview that drew the most heat was the section about the actual moment of the killing. Adam22 relayed what the guest had told him about the encounter on camera, and a single phrase from that exchange became the most widely clipped moment of the entire conversation.
He made me. He shouldn't. What did he say? Why he said he shot? Too much movement.
That last phrase, too much movement, was clipped and reposted thousands of times. For many in hip-hop, the casualness of the language attached to the killing of a 20-year-old artist felt like the line was being crossed in real time. Adam22 also told the room that under current California rules, the guest could not be charged as an adult, and that the broader picture of the booking was about a kind of access hip-hop had never had before. He framed the entire situation as the first time the public was getting to hear from someone connected to the killing of a major rap figure shortly after release rather than decades later.
So this is the first time that we were able to ever see somebody really kill a rapper, get out of jail, and speak about it.
Adam22 compared the booking to interviews he had previously done with figures convicted of violent crimes years after the fact. He cited a Sacramento rapper named X-Rated who had served roughly 25 years before sitting down with No Jumper. He also cited his prior interview with Terrence Gangster Williams, a figure he described on camera as a man with dozens of bodies tied to his name in New Orleans street history. His argument was that he had platformed killers before without backlash and that the only difference was the timing of the interview and the identity of the victim. That argument, consistency as the principle, was the version of his defense that ran through almost every clip and statement he posted in the first 48 hours after the interview went up. But for hip-hop, the math wasn't sitting the same way. Pop Smoke wasn't an old story. He was a Brooklyn drill artist whose debut album posthumously reached #1 on the Billboard 200, and his February 2020 killing in a Hollywood Hills home invasion is still part of the active memory of the genre. His family publicly responded to the resurfacing of the killing, calling the comments around it disrespectful, and that framing set the floor for the reaction that was about to roll in. By the end of the first week, the question wasn't whether the interview was newsworthy. The question was whether it should have happened at all. DJ Akademiks leads the pushback. Of all the voices that piled in on Adam22 over the booking, none landed harder or more publicly than DJ Akademiks. The Spotify house streamer and longtime hip-hop commentator carries one of the loudest microphones in the genre, and his criticism of Adam22 cut through the noise immediately. Akademiks made it clear early on that he wasn't outraged by the sport. He had been a defender of Adam22's right to platform whoever he wanted for years, and the two had appeared on each other's shows multiple times. So when he turned, the turn carried weight on stream. Akademiks framed the Pop Smoke booking as a different kind of platforming. Not because the guest was a criminal, but because of what the interview was signaling. According to a report compiled by Complex, Akademiks raised the concern that the interview essentially gave a young man fresh out of a sentence a victory lap on the very platform that hip-hop watches most closely. His phrasing was sharp and direct. He reduced the booking down to its bluntest possible version, that Adam22 had interviewed Pop Smoke's killer. Not an alleged participant, not a person tied to the case, but the killer. That framing made it impossible for Adam22 to slide out of the room quietly. Where it got more layered, though, was in a separate clash that bled into the same conversation. The Lil Boom situation, which had been brewing on the No Jumper Reddit and across social media, became the trigger that brought Akademiks and Adam22 into the same room face-to-face. For context, Lil Boom is a rapper Akademiks had personally championed for years. According to Akademiks' own account on stream, he had paid for Boom's flights, given him a place to stay, and reportedly even covered family expenses during a rough stretch. So when footage and accusations linking Boom to predatory behavior at a Walmart began circulating publicly with Adam22's platform amplifying the story, Akademiks took it as a shot, not just at Boom but at him by extension. The two eventually sat down for a long-form podcast together with Trap Lord Ross and No Jumper's Remo, and Akademiks was openly emotional about how the situation had played out. He opened the conversation by acknowledging that the only reason they were able to talk about it now was that it was the first time they were doing it face-to-face.
I guess we could talk about it now for the first time in person. I was so ready.
Akademiks described being ready to go to war with No Jumper over the Boom situation before the truth of the footage settled the issue. He told Adam22 directly that he had been on the verge of launching a sustained public campaign against the platform, something he had never wanted to do because he had always defended the right of other media figures to operate however they wanted.
As I've told you, I've been pro-platforms. I might have to wage war on No Jumper.
Adam22 pushed back with the explanation that the Boom story had been engineered on the No Jumper subreddit before he ever amplified it himself, and that the heaviest hands in the exposing process had been other figures and not him personally. Akademiks weren't moved by the framing. He told Adam22 directly that when he saw the No Jumper post go up, his reading was that Adam was hitting at people around him because he was too cautious to come at him directly. He said the energy felt like an attack designed to bypass the main target. The deeper layer, and the one that connects back to the Pop Smoke conversation, is that Akademiks was using the Boom episode to set the stage for a broader argument about how Adam22 operates as a media figure. The argument was simple. When controversy is the engine of the platform, the line between coverage and weaponization gets blurry, and at some point the people in the genre have to decide whether they're comfortable feeding the engine. That argument was the same one being made by people who hated the Pop Smoke booking. Akademiks just happened to have a personal entry point. He also went into deep emotional territory on stream when discussing how the Boom situation had cost him a friend. He described paying for Boom's flights, giving him a place to stay in his studio downstairs, and traveling with him to multiple cities for work. He stressed that Boom had been a constant presence around him during major moments and that watching the footage had been personally devastating.
That fucked me up, bro.
Is he a reason why you're kind of like falling back?
The combined weight of the Pop Smoke booking and the Boom episode produced something rare in the streamer-to-streamer space, a sustained public crack between Akademiks and Adam22 that didn't dissolve back into mutual promotion within days. Academics acknowledged on stream that the situation had cost him trust in a way that wasn't going to bounce back quickly. What made the pushback so important to the wider rapper reaction was the cover it provided. Once a figure of his reach was openly questioning whether No Jumper had drifted out of bounds. Smaller artists who had been staying quiet now had room to chime in. And many of them did. That set off the next wave. The wider wave of rappers weighing in. After Academics opened the door, the responses from other corners of hip-hop started rolling in, and the texture of the criticism varied wildly depending on who was doing the talking. Some artists came at Adam22 head-on, some used subliminals, and a few escalated the situation into territory that looked physical. The most direct confrontation came from 4Extra, a rapper who didn't bother with sub-tweets or coded language. He went on Instagram and called Adam22 out for a fade, a public challenge to fight, using language that bypassed the podcast etiquette most figures in the space rely on. According to posts circulating on Instagram, 4Extra framed it as personal and stripped the conversation down to the simplest possible version of the disagreement, that Adam22 had crossed lines too many times and that talk wasn't going to settle it. Boozy Badazz, who has spent years using his platform to comment on every rolling controversy in rap, came at the situation from a different angle. Boozy didn't always name Adam22 directly, but his commentary clips, which moved across Instagram Live and reaction channels, landed on the broader theme. He framed the Pop Smoke killing and the way the post-release narrative was being handled as part of a culture-wide failure. And his framing pushed the moral weight of the conversation back onto the people platforming the story rather than only onto the young man giving it. Buzzy's voice mattered because he sits in a particular intersection of hip-hop credibility. He spent real time in prison. He's lost people to the same kind of violence that killed Pop Smoke, and his audience trusts him to speak from a place that isn't theoretical. So when he leaned into the conversation, he gave language to the people who didn't have his reach but felt the same way. Then there was Rory Farrell from the new Rory and Mal podcast. Rory's reaction was one of the more unexpected turns because he doesn't sit in the street rap commentary lane. He's a media figure first, a podcast host whose audience is wide and not particularly drill-coded, but the reports of his on-M reaction described him as visibly shaken when discussing the booking. He used his platform to argue that the interview shouldn't have existed, and his framing, coming from someone whose entire career depends on the principle that long-form interviews are valuable, was hard to dismiss. The fact that Rory of all people couldn't justify the booking became one of the running quotes in the broader conversation. If even the people whose job is to defend long-form sit-downs couldn't defend this one, the argument went that said something. Inside the No Jumper ecosystem itself, the reaction got even messier. Two rappers, Suspect and Lil Kelpie, ended up in a heated confrontation on the platform during a separate appearance. And that confrontation became part of the broader discussion about the kind of energy No Jumper was now hosting. The framing wasn't that Suspect or Kelpie were reacting to the Pop Smoke interview specifically. The framing was that the platform itself had become a place where conflict was the default mode, and that the Pop Smoke booking was the most visible symptom of that drift. Dean the Great, another hip-hop figure who had appeared on No Jumper, ended up in a public clash with Adam22 during an interview that ended with him being escorted out. According to clips that circulated on Facebook, that kind of exit isn't unique on No Jumper, but the timing matters. Coming in the middle of the wider Pop Smoke backlash, it added to the perception that the platform was generating more friction than insight. Subliminal shots, meanwhile, came from corners of hip-hop that don't usually weigh in on podcast politics. Across Instagram captions and tweet replies, multiple artists posted the same three categories of statements. Media is weird right now. Top giving clout to the wrong people. And some things shouldn't be interviews. None of those phrases name Adam22 directly. All of them are unmistakable in context. That style of indirect criticism is a hip-hop convention with a specific function. When an artist doesn't want to escalate publicly with someone who has a large audience and a platform that reaches their fan base, the move is to telegraph disapproval without giving the larger figure a clip to respond to. It's a form of pressure that works specifically because the person being criticized can't engage without confirming the framing. A separate strain of criticism came from artists who were focused less on the moral question and more on the access question. Multiple rappers across posts on Facebook and elsewhere raised a version of the same complaint, that they had never been asked for an interview while a person tied to a major killing was given the spotlight. Put underneath was that Adam22's booking calendar appeared to reward shock over craft, and that working artists with discographies and active careers were being passed over in favor of viral moments. That argument had been simmering for years, but the Pop Smoke booking gave it a specific receipt to point at. The most emotionally charged reaction, though, came from Pop Smoke's family. According to coverage from New York's Power 105.1 FM, members of the family responded to the resurfacing of the killing with a mix of grief and anger. And the framing they used was simple. They called the comments around the killing disrespectful, and they made it clear that the story was not entertainment for them. That framing reset the conversation. To that point, much of the debate had been between media figures arguing about journalism. Once the family weighed in, the question stopped being theoretical. There was a real grieving family on one side of the booking, and the family was saying out loud that the booking had hurt them. That breath turned the booking into something larger than a single episode. Turned it into a referendum on what No Jumper was for. The federal visit, Big U, and the Whack 100 rumor. While the Pop Smoke booking was still moving across timelines, a second story dropped that briefly looked like it was going to swallow Adam22 whole. The story was that federal agents had visited his home, and the rumor that immediately attached to the visit was that Adam22 had been picked up by the feds in connection with a major RICO investigation in Los Angeles. That rumor, depending on who you asked, was either the biggest moment of the year or the most over-leveraged piece of misinformation hip-hop social media had run with in a long time. Truth, as it eventually settled, sat somewhere in between, and the reaction from rappers and industry figures ended up tracking the misinformation just as much as the underlying facts. Here's what actually happened. According to Adam22's own public response, federal agents did show up at his home. The visit was tied to documentation related to Eugene Big U Henley, a name that carries serious weight in Los Angeles street and music circles, and a broader RICO investigation. What the agents were reportedly looking for was a cease and desist letter that Big U had sent to No Jumper after a 2019 interview with Loose Cannon. That interview had touched on allegations about prior knowledge of Nipsey Hussle's murder, and the letter had reportedly gone out shortly after. Adam22 made it clear that he was not arrested, not detained, and not under investigation as a suspect. According to reporting from Hot New Hip Hop, he said his lawyer spoke to the agents directly, confirmed the scope of the visit, and that the matter was about a specific document tied to a separate investigation that didn't target him personally. That clarification came after the rumor had already exploded. The ignition for the rumor was Whack 100. Cash Money executive and longtime hip-hop power player went online and claimed Adam22 had been picked up by the feds. And within a few hours that framing had spread across social media, blogs, and podcast pages without confirmation, Whack 100's voice carries because of his industry ties, his proximity to the artists involved, and his history of being right often enough to be taken seriously when he speaks. So when he framed the visit as a federal takedown, the rest of the ecosystem reacted to that framing rather than to the slower, more accurate version that Adam22 was trying to push out behind it. Academics again were part of the wave that kept the story alive. He didn't fully accuse Adam2 of being a target. But on stream, he discussed what a RICO connection could mean, raised the seriousness of the investigation, and let the speculation breathe. In hip-hop streaming culture, that kind of measured but curious framing is enough to keep a story trending for days. Brickaby's name also got tied into the broader conversation. He didn't make a direct statement, but his association with the figures the federal investigation was reportedly looking at meant his presence in the discourse functioned as additional fuel. Fans started speculating about how close No Jumper had been to street activity in Los Angeles, and the speculation didn't need direct quotes to gain traction. Loose Cannon, the original interview subject whose comments had triggered the cease and desist letter in the first place, also became part of the story by association. The interview that pulled federal attention back toward No Jumper was the interview he had done years earlier. And the fact that old No Jumper content was now being pulled into a federal proceeding gave the entire debate a different weight. It wasn't just about whether the Pop Smoke booking had crossed a line. It was about whether the platform's archive itself was now being treated as evidenced by people who weren't fans. That framing explains why so many rappers reacted strongly even though on paper Adam22 wasn't in legal trouble. In hip-hop culture, talking about specific cases on camera carries real risk. When old No Jumper interviews started appearing in conversations about RICO charges, the genre's appetite for sit-downs about active cases sharpened. Artists who might have considered appearing on the platform started running the math on whether their appearance could resurface in the wrong room years later. There was also a layer of distrust that hardened. Some rappers had been arguing for years that Adam22's platform sat too close to street politics, that he was capturing real-life narratives in a way that would eventually become a problem for someone other than him. The federal visit, even though it didn't end in charges, was framed by those same critics as a confirmation of what they had been saying. The fact that Wack 100 was the one who pushed the rumor furthest only deepened the layers. Wack has his own complicated history with No Jumper and with the Los Angeles ecosystem the platform regularly covers, and his willingness to amplify the federal visit as a takedown was read by some as a settling of older scores. Whether or not that read is fair, the dynamics of who was speaking and why became part of the story itself. Reporting from Hot New Hip Hop noted that the broader RICO conversation around Big U had been a major Los Angeles hip-hop story. Even before the No Jumper connection became part of the public conversation, that story was already moving on its own. The visit to Adam22's home didn't change the trajectory of the larger investigation. It just placed his platform inside the frame. For Adam22, the federal visit became the second major wave in a year of rolling fires. Where the Pop Smoke booking had been an editorial controversy, a question of whether the interview should have happened, the Wack 100 rumor was a credibility test. He had to publicly clarify his own status. And that clarification had to compete with louder voices pushing a more dramatic version of events. That's what brings us to the last piece of this story. Piece that sits underneath the title itself. So what is Adam22's sentence really? Now that all of the threads are on the table, the Pop Smoke booking, the academics pushback, the wave of rappers, the federal visit, there's a question hanging over everything that the title is asking and that the story has been quietly answering the whole time. What sentence are we actually talking about? 'Cause the honest answer, the answer that the research keeps coming back to, is that Adam22 hasn't been sentenced. He has not been charged with a felony. He has not served prison time. He has not been convicted of a crime in any widely documented way. The sentence that pulled rappers, podcast hosts, and the wider hip-hop audience into this conversation isn't his sentence. It's the sentence of the young man who sat across from him at the No Jumper Studios, the alleged Pop Smoke shooter. And the way that sentence was discussed, framed, and treated as content, that's the pivot point of this entire story. The reaction from rappers wasn't about Adam22's punishment. It was about Adam22's role in handling someone else's punishment, and whether that handling crossed lines hip-hop wasn't ready to forgive. What Adam22 does have, and what's accurate to say, is a stack of allegations and civil disputes that have followed him for years. According to Pitchfork's 2018 reporting, multiple women publicly accused him of sexual assault and coercion, and the accusations were detailed enough to cost him business relationships at the time, including a partnership with Atlantic Records. He denied the allegations, and no criminal charges were filed. He has faced civil lawsuits. According to coverage from Dixerto, former employees have filed cases alleging workplace harassment and misconduct. According to reporting from Complex, claims of fuel harassment from former staff have been part of those legal disputes. According to Soap Central's coverage, assault allegations tied to incidents at No Jumper Studios have circulated as well. None of those cases have produced a criminal conviction against him. He has also presided over near physical altercations on his platform, which have been documented as part of the No Jumper editorial style for years, and his business has taken real damage. According to publicly available reporting collected on Wikipedia, Adam22 admitted in 2025 that No Jumper was facing financial pressure, that staff had been laid off, and that the company was downsizing. That's not a courtroom sentence, but it's a verdict the market is delivering on its own terms. So, when you put the picture together, what the rappers are reacting to isn't a courtroom outcome. It's a long pattern, a pattern of bookings that pushed boundaries, lawsuits that piled up, federal attention that grazed the platform without sticking, and an editorial style that monetized exactly the kind of conflict the rest of hip-hop is supposed to avoid. Pop Smoke interview was the moment that pattern became impossible to ignore. The killer's sentence, the actual legal sentence that brought him out of juvenile detention and onto Adam22's couch, became the symbol of everything that had been simmering. Clips of that conversation, the family's response, the streamer pushback, and the federal visit that landed on top of all of it, stacked together into something the genre couldn't keep absorbing quietly. What's worth saying clearly is that the framing of Adam22's sentence, the framing that pulled most of us into this story, turns out to mean something different than it first sounds. He hasn't been sentenced. The sentence is the killer's. The reaction is to him for booking the killer. And the larger reaction is to the version of hip-hop media he represents. In the bigger picture, that distinction matters. There's a real difference between a media figure who has been convicted of a crime and a media figure whose track record is a stack of allegations, lawsuits, and editorial decisions that the genre has decided it's not okay with. Adam22 sits in the second category. The first category is reserved for people who have actually faced legal consequences, and the documented record doesn't put him there. That's also why the rapper's reaction has the character it has. The pushback isn't asking for him to be locked up. It's asking for him to be held to a different editorial standard. It's asking whether the people on his couch deserve the platform they're being given. It's asking whether No Jumper, as it currently operates, is still part of hip-hop or has drifted into something parallel to it that uses the genre as raw material. The verdict on whether the title is true depends entirely on how you read the word sentence. If you read it as a courtroom outcome for Adam 2, the title doesn't hold up. There's no such sentence. If you read it as the literal sentence that the alleged Pop Smoke shooter served, the sentence Adam22 turned into an interview, then yes, rappers reacted to that sentence and the reaction was sustained, multi-layered, and overwhelmingly negative. That's where the story stands, and that's where we'll leave it with an open question that the next 12 months at No Jumper and the next round of rapper reactions are going to answer for everyone watching. Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen.